Several months ago, my friend Taryn at Conjured Craft asked if I wanted to join their Art Goblins Discord. Now, one of the primary activities in the Discord recently is Monster Bash, a crazy concept that I'm pretty sure originated with Trent, now headed up by Taryn. We were all tasked with creating 8 prompt cards to help with idea generation of our monsters. Since I cannot draw, I decided to go very arts and crafts, cut and glue, collage style. Then in one chaotic video call, we all randomly pulled 6 of these cards. I'll add a link in the description to Taryn's itch page, where you can find the cards for yourself. So with that all explained, here are my cards. This gooey eyeball, horns on a furry head, a nose, this awesome, dark, veiny mood, an adorable little tree, and a tire. The easiest card for me was this eyeball. See, I'd found these plastic eyeballs at the dollar store and thought one would be perfect here. This horned head led me to think spikes, teeth, talons maybe. I happen to know this nose is from a bat, so maybe wings. This dark one could be the overall vibe, or maybe something like this could be on the eye. This cute little tree meant I'd definitely be using some barky texture, if not actual wood. Finally, the tire. Maybe lean into a dark, shadowy figure. My starting place was the eye. I kind of thought of a bat, but instead of a body, it's just a giant flying eyeball. So I cut a piece of wire, cut a small hole in the eye, and glued the wire in. I like the concept of tendrils draping from this bat thing, so I left plenty of armature to wrap them around. To make the base slightly more interesting and to blatantly incorporate one of my cards, I grabbed a chunk of wood and glued it to the base. Then to securely attach the armature and model, I drilled an appropriately sized hole and glued the wire into the wood. And with that, I started to have a reasonable silhouette coming together. Now, I've got to admit, I had never sculpted anything. Ever. Never mixed any green stuff or similar. And only ever used sprue glue to fill gaps. Not due to anything other than ease of use and, quite frankly, laziness. In my experience, though, the way to get better at something is to just try. No fear of failure. There's no real failure, after all. Just learning opportunities. So I mixed up some milliput and green stuff to play around with the mediums and see how they behaved. To me, the milliput felt much softer, maybe easier to spread. So I started wrapping it around the eye. I didn't worry about leaving fingerprints. If anything, I liked the slight texture. After covering the eye nearly completely, I cut an opening in the shape I was going for. Then rolled out a couple of thin snakes of milliput, creating interesting sort of lips to the eyelids. With a small amount of leftover putty, I rolled out several different spiky, tooth-like pieces, and left it all to cure for a couple of hours. I needed some wings for this flying bat eyeball thing. Luckily, I had this bag of cheap dinosaur toys, and this little dude didn't seem to be using theirs. After de-winging the dino, and looking at how they might look on the monster, I decided to change the silhouette a bit. To me, kitbashing, trash bashing, sculpt bashing is all about trying and refining, seeing how things look together, and adjusting the look as you go. So to me, changing the wing shape helps focus everything on the eyeball, the center of the model. The other thing that needed to go was these fingers at the crest of the wings. Less hand-like, more spikes. A little super glue and some trusty baking soda, and the wings were in place. Attaching some milliput spikes where the weird fingers had been completed the wings. Then a single horn on the top of the head finished the general shape of our monster. Overall, I was happy with the location and appearance of everything, but needed to incorporate it better. Make it feel like one thing, rather than stuff attached to a thing. Enter green stuff. I rolled out some snakes and began wrapping them around the base of the wings, talons, and the horn. First smoothing them into place with a silicone tool, then adding some texture with what is probably my favorite sculpting tool so far, a toothpick. In my extremely limited experience, Green stuff is much firmer than milliput. It's harder to mix and generally takes more force to manipulate. This firmness sort of allowed me to be more aggressive with this texturing process. I found it more difficult to poke all the way through or kind of tear the green stuff. Rather than legs and feet, I liked the idea that this flying eyeball had tendrils or tentacles. Maybe this little freak was just landing or taking off from this chunk of wood. I began winding several more snakes of green stuff around the wire, first sort of creating a central mass, then weaving other tentacles over top, being sure to drape some over the chunk of wood and the base. Some texture was added with the toothpick, and by pressing a cut-off section of the wing into the green stuff. Feeling pretty happy with it, I left it to cure once again. After adding texture to the base, I found this tire from a hobby kit in my bits bin, and decided to go very literal with the one card, pressing it into the texture paste. With everything dry and cured, it was time for some paint. I wanted to end up with a fairly pale, rusty orange kind of flesh. So I started with Abyssal Turquoise, following it up with a zenithal highlight of Jade Green. Picking up the brush, I started with Grunge Brown and my normal, sketchy brushstrokes. I left quite a bit of the underpainted colors showing through as I thought it might lead to a more mottled, eerie end result. Then mixed in more and more warm white, desaturating the rusty orange color as I covered less and less surface. The bulk of this little guy was this color, which left me with plenty of time to think about what exactly it was. Painting around and around this one giant eyeball led me to consider its importance. Giant eye, no mouth. Maybe this eyeball is how it feeds. Diving down on its prey, skewering them with horn or talons, and consuming their soul, drawing this ephemeral food source into its single giant eye. Vampiric, but feeding on the soul rather than blood. Perfect subject for a video released on Halloween. For the eye itself, I wanted to stay away from traditional eyeball colors. Nothing close to white or off-white. First, covering the whole thing with ghost green. I feel like working on large, smooth surfaces like this can help your freehand skills, or at least your brush control. Probably two sides of the same coin. For the iris and pupil, I first sketched a line down more or less the middle of the eye, then focused on sketching and filling in one half at a time. Although it seems counterintuitive, it's best to keep a loose grip on the brush. This allows the fine motor skills to flourish. The tight grip might feel like more control, but it's actually the opposite. Finally, based on this card, I sketched in some dark veins, first with neutral gray, then on the bottom side of the original sketch with black. And with that, here it is, my monster for Monster Bash 6. The first sculpting I've ever done, and I'm pretty happy with it. And importantly, I want you to make weird things with your friends. So grab some friends, the cards from the link below, draw 6 cards, and make weird things. And please, please go check out all my friends' wonderful creations. They're all linked below. And to the art goblins, you know who you are. I love you all. You make the world a better place.